Now, today, we are very happy and very excited to have Patrick Kuwana, the CEO and founder of Crossover Transformation Group, speak to us. Patrick was our final speaker in November. And we said, man, it'll be great to have the person who ended it off last year as our first speaker for 2022. And so the topic for today is resilient leaders in an uncertain world. What is required of leaders when the future is less predictable and continuously changing? So when Mr. Lawrence of Edgemead High School speaks about how things are changing in their space, and Mr. Kibido speaks about the changes, we hope that in this afternoon's conversation, as we hand over to Patrick to lead us in the next conversation, and so welcome, Patrick. A real privilege to have you as our guest speaker this afternoon, and over to you.
Sorry, just needed to unmute there. Thank you so much, Selwyn. Really appreciate it. And it is such a always an honor and a privilege to be here. So thank you once again to your team for inviting me to be part of your start of the year. Yeah, and I think thank you for all the educators that have registered, who are on the platform for today. It's really such a honor and a privilege to be able to speak with you and just share a few ideas, a few thoughts that can helpfully help you in the journey that you have in store for this year. And I think before I go into the slides, I was actually, when I was speaking to Selwyn and his team the other day, I was actually just saying to them, you know, as somebody who's in the more on the business side, I have so much respect for principals, teachers, in terms of the leadership roles that you have, because I don't think there is anyone else, I would almost say any other profession on the planet that has such a diverse situations that you have to deal with when it comes to leadership. Because as educators, principals, teachers, you know, on one hand, you're having to deal with leadership from the lens of you leading children. On the other hand, you're having to deal with leadership when it comes to, you know, your own peers and staff, you know, related issues. On the other hand, you have to deal with leadership, you know, from the lens of, you know, having to deal with parents. On another lens, you're probably having to deal with leadership, you know, in a classroom situation, in a sports field situation. So the situations of leadership that you have to deal with are probably the most diverse ever than any other leader. You know, no business leader, probably no government leader has the level of diversity when it comes to leadership that you deal with. And so I have a lot of respect in terms of what you are carrying as leaders, and therefore just you know, the amazing job that you do. But also it's yeah, it's a tough place to be a leader in, and so I really honor you for serving in this way. So let me go into the topic for today. So we're talking about resilient leaders in a uncertain world. So let's look at that in a bit more detail. Let's see if I can get my slides here to move. I seem to be hung up here. Okay, there we go. So I have put a very simple question here that you can maybe just share some of your thoughts in the chat room. And the question is, what's your biggest leadership challenge? If you can maybe just in the chat room quickly just type in, doesn't have to be a long thing, just a sentence or even just a word. What is your biggest leadership challenge? So let me give you a minute or two and let's see what sort of feedback we are getting from that. And maybe Selwyn, can I maybe ask you to do me a favor, as you see anything coming in the chat, just maybe call it out.
Sure, Patrick. All right. Overload administration burden. Let's see what else comes up. Delegation, getting educators to move out of their comfort zone. Security is a big issue. Biggest leadership challenge is security. Keeping staff motivated. Funding for schools. Interesting. Wow. Keeping staff motivated. Leading in perseverance, facing new problems with creativity.
Okay, maybe a last few. Anyone else with anything to add to that? What are your greatest leadership challenges?
Nothing new.
Nothing new. Okay, no, that's fine. Let's see, carrying the burden in the class and managing teachers. Learning challenges, discipline. Okay, no, that's good. That gives us a little bit of a sense of what's going on out there. So what I would like to do is let's talk a little bit of the topic that we have at hand here, and I'm not sure why my slides are...
Perhaps if you go out, Patrick, and come back in.
Okay.
Out of the slides.
Out of the slides. Okay, let me just come. Okay, so let me just sorry about that. Let me just come out. And then let me try and come back in again with the slides and see. How we do there.
There you go.
Okay, there we go. Okay, I think we are hopefully on the go now. Let's see how we do it. Okay, sorry about that. So we want to talk about our topic. And one of the things I always like to do is to just give some definitions about what we are actually talking about so that we are all on the same page. So we're talking about resilience here. And I think let's just spend a couple of moments looking at what the definition of resilient actually is. And the two most significant definitions I found was, firstly, the ability to withstand or recover quickly from a difficult condition or difficult conditions. So whenever we're talking about resilience, we are talking about the fact that we are recovering quickly from a difficult condition or difficult situation. So immediately when we are talking about resilience, we immediately realize that there is a difficult situation or a difficult condition that we are having to deal with. And resilience is about how quickly we are able to recover from it or to withstand it. And I was just finding a couple of other words that sort of relate to resilience: quick to recover, quick to bounce back, difficult to keep down, adaptable, flexible. These are all the sort of words that can describe being resilient. The other definition I found was the ability to recoil or spring back into shape after bending, stretching, or being compressed. Interesting definition, because again, it's speaking about how do we bounce back? How do we spring back into shape after we've been bent, after we've been stretched, after we've been compressed? And again, this talks about flexible, supple, plastic, elastic, etc. So this is talking about objects, but we can actually apply ourselves into these very definitions. So difficult situation, we're under pressure, it's not what we typically enjoy, but how quickly do we bounce back? How quickly do we get back into shape? That's really what we are talking about as we talk about resilience. So we're also talking about uncertain. So what does uncertain mean? Again, two definitions here: not able to be relied on, not known, or definite. So there's an element of the unknown, it's unsettled, it's unresolved, it's unsure. Some other sort of words that came up here, unpredictable, up in the air, unforeseen. So we are dealing with all of these things as we go forward, the uncertainty that goes with the work that we are involved in. Another definition is not completely confident or sure of something. Unsure, doubtful, undecided, indecisive. These are all words that are describing uncertainty. So it's important, therefore, for us to immediately realize that we cannot deny the fact that we are probably living in the most uncertain times than we've ever lived in our lives before. Obviously, with the pandemic and everything that came with that over the last 2 years, and I think there's still elements of it even going into this year. And I think, again, as educators, you have probably been affected the most. Schools have had to close, you've had to come up with different ways of teaching, you've literally had to come up with a plan to mitigate against the uncertainty that has been in place. Let's also talk a little bit about defining leadership. And I think for those who were in the session at the end of the year, we talked about this definition, these three definitions already. So what is leadership? Leadership is a process of social influence which maximizes the efforts of others towards the achievement of a goal. Leadership is the art of motivating a group of people to act toward achieving a common goal. And we also said that a leader is somebody who can see how things can be improved and who rallies people to move toward a better vision. So with all of these definitions of leadership, we can see that influence is a big thing about leadership. Another big thing about leadership is about mobilizing people, motivating people to achieve a common goal. So the issue of a common goal is quite important. There has to be a common goal that we as leaders are influencing people to be able to see that common goal and then motivating them so that we can get to that common goal. That third definition also talks about a leader being somebody who wants to see how things can be done better and who rallies people to be able to do that. So those are some of the definitions that we can work with as we go into this topic. So, who is a leader? Because this is also going to be very important as we go further into what we are talking about today. And a leader is essentially anyone who has influence over one or more people. So leadership is not about a position, it's more about your ability to influence. So leadership is not about a position, it's about your ability to influence. And by the way, influence can either be positive or negative. So what we are really wanting to do here is to build our skills in how we influence positively. And the reason why I say that if you have influence over one or more people, you're a leader, and that leadership is not a position, we must also be aware that if you have, for example, a problematic child in a class who is always disrupting the class, and that child is never dealt with appropriately and continues to do that, that child could easily become the leader in the class, even over and above the teacher, because if the children in the class are now going to be more influenced by the behavior of that child rather than what the teacher is saying, then the real leader in the class is actually that problematic child. So that's why leadership is not really about a position, it's about the ability to influence. And I often say to leaders that children at times can be such good leaders from the perspective of how they can use their youth to actually lead adults, because at times they can even lead through manipulation. So leadership is not a position, it's about your ability to influence. So today we're talking about uncertainty, and I would like us to literally have 4 to 5 minutes to go back into groups and to answer these questions very quickly in your groups. The questions being, how do people behave when there's uncertainty? What happens when people face uncertainty? How do they typically behave? Maybe you want to share a quick example of a situation you have experienced of how people behave when things are uncertain. And then maybe what we'll just do is we'll have maybe 2 or 3 people just quickly share what they talked about in their groups. So Selwyn, can we have, let's just say 4 minutes so that we keep up to time, because I don't want us to miss our time deadlines here. So let's have 4 minutes of quick group discussions. How do people typically behave when there's uncertainty? What's a quick example that you've experienced? And then we'll have a few minutes of feedback, and then I will then go into unpacking the topic a little bit more.
Perfect. We're going into the groups right now. Patrick, over to you. Everyone's back.
Are we back? Okay. Perhaps Selwyn, you can maybe just facilitate for me. Probably just ask two or three people if they can just give us some feedback, what you sort of discussed in your groups. So let's have two or three people just give 1 minute, 1 minute each feedback.
Any feedback? And the question was, how do they behave? How do people behave when things are uncertain? I'm sure there are lots of examples. Let's hear them. Unmute. Mr.
Yeah,
Lawrence.
I don't think. Yeah, I don't. I was saying in our group chat, which I eventually got into, and we only had a few seconds left. But I think the uncertainty that they're facing for Monday is.
Just give us. I'll just. There's someone talking right now, so Mr. Lawrence, continue.
Yeah, so I think the biggest change is going back to so-called normality. And both pupils and staff facing the uncertainty of what is going to come. So the behavior is going to be an interesting one. And I think personally, I think you're going to see a lot of self-preservation happening. And obviously with the lots and lots of talk about mental health and separating work from play or home, I think that that is going to be your biggest challenge, and that's where I see self-preservation coming in. And also, I think it's going to be adapting from being me to being more accepting to interaction again on a physical, personal level rather than through a virtual chat show, virtual teaching. So quickly, a big example is going to be for pupils and staff is moving through the school. When the school is only built for 700 people and you've got 1,300 people moving through your school, it's going to be quite an experience for a lot of kids. Only being on a rotational and teachers only teaching half a class, so to suddenly teaching 40 in a class, or like my matric history class is 36 children. For that, it's going to be quite a challenge, and I can't say how they're going to behave, but it's going to be an interesting one. And we had the UCT Vice Chancellor talking here to our matrics, and her big question was courage. We're going to need courage. So we're going to have to try and up their behavior to accept they're going to have courage to get through this year.
Thank you so much. Anyone else?
Hey, let's have maybe one more. Yeah,
one more.
Yeah.
I heard a voice in the distance. Please unmute yourself.
Shelvin?
Rodney, go for it.
Yes, we facing the similar thing, and what I said is, as a leader, you know how the people are going to react. So what we have done for this week, I listen and give people the opportunity to share their fears and also to share their solutions. We had a dry run so that you can lead them to conquer their fears, and also taking them back to how they can overcome this. And after we have done that, we are ready to face it head on Monday.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you. Well,
over to you, Patrick.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that. That's actually very, very useful feedback. So let's go into a little bit of the content, just to sort of what typically happens in times of uncertainty. The first thing that we need to realize is that our human brains do not like uncertainty. We are typically designed to be creatures of habit. We like to be able to do routine things. We like what we know. And whenever we are faced with situations that we do not know, situations where we are uncertain, situations where we feel that we cannot cope because we don't know, whenever we feel that we are not in control, typically the brain gets us into typically one of three modes. The first mode is the fighting mode. And the fighting mode is really where, because I don't have control, I don't know, things are too uncertain, I will try and fight the situation because I don't want to be seen to be in a position of insecurity. I don't want to be seen to be in a position where I am vulnerable. So I fight the situation. The second one is freeze, and freeze is literally where we just don't know what to do. And with freezing, we will typically also retract into a shell. We will become, we won't contribute. We won't be able to face the situation in any way. And this is really where we almost like get into a closet and we close ourselves in a closet and we completely stop any participation in what we are doing. Similarly, with the flight scenario, we just completely check out and we leave. The freezing situation, we just don't know what to do. We don't know whether to run, whether to fight. The flight situation is we just completely leave the situation because we just can't handle it. And that's just how the brain is, because human beings, we battle with any situations of uncertainty. Matter of fact, in terms of how the brain works, our brain function decreases when we are in fear, frustration, or pain, whether that pain is physical or emotional pain. So the flight, the freeze, or the fight are typically what happens when we are in fear, when we are in frustration, or when we are in physical or emotional pain. And these things typically happen, again, when we are in situations of being uncertain, because uncertainty brings a level of fear, it brings a level of frustration, it might even bring a level of pain. And so we need to be very aware that often there's going to be impaired thinking, because this impacts the way that we are able to think rationally when we are in a situation like this. So I think as leaders, it's very critical that we know what is potentially happening in ourselves, but also equally importantly, to know that this is what's happening with the people who are around us. As a good leader, as soon as there is uncertainty, as soon as there is a lot of unpredictability, unknowns, I already know that the people around me are going to be in various forms of either flight or fight or freezing, because there's an element of fear of the unknown. There's an element of frustration. Things aren't working out the way that I would want them to work out. And there's an element of pain, physical or emotional pain. And therefore there is impaired thinking. And whenever there's impaired thinking, it will typically invoke negative feelings, and negative feelings can very quickly invoke improper behavior, because the way we think determines the way we feel. The way we feel will determine the chosen behavior. So in times of uncertainty, where there's impaired thinking, there might very well be negative feelings which bring about improper behavior. That's why when we typically get into discussions or situations where we feel uncomfortable or threatened, our thoughts are impaired, we have negative feelings, and we typically have negative behavior because we are now either fighting the situation because we are feeling insecurity, we are feeling fearful about the situation that we are involved in. So I believe the most critical attribute of a leader is actually self-leadership. And what I mean by self-leadership is essentially how you think as a leader, how you feel, and your chosen path of behavior. That for me is the most critical aspect of leadership, where you are able to self-lead. And self-leadership is all about, am I in a position to take responsibility and to control my thoughts and to change my thoughts such that my behavior is appropriate, that my behavior is the right behavior, even in a situation where there might be chaos. So making decisions as leaders is essentially the art of what leadership is, because as you make decisions and as you influence other people towards the decisions that you are making, it all comes out of how you think, how you feel, and how you behave. So there are many things that are happening around us. There's many, stimulus that we are taking into our brains. There are emotions that are being invoked. But the big question is, how do I filter what I need to filter, and how do I interpret it so that my behavior is one that leads people down the pathway of finding a solution, rather than a behavior that actually fuels the chaos. And I think as leaders, that's the critical element. Am I fueling the chaos, or am I able to actually lead people out of the chaos into a different future? And it all comes from how we think and our ability to actually take control of our emotions, filter everything, and then act through the right behavior. In fact, it's actually interesting. There's a passage that talks about take every thought captive. What is that? What is that talking about? It's really just saying we have the ability as human beings to actually capture our thoughts, and before we behave, we can change the thought process so that we behave appropriately. So that's one of the things that as leaders, that's the essence of self-leadership. So self-leadership, absolute critical to everything. So let's talk a little bit about this practically. Leading others in uncertain times requires you to first master the art of leading yourself. And this is what I've just been talking about, being very aware of your own emotions, being very aware of your own thoughts. I even say to some leaders that I work with, have a little notebook where during the course of the day, just write your emotions as you go. If you get into a situation where you feel angry, just write it down and process it later. Why was I angry? Why did this situation actually make me angry? Was it because the person said something that threatens me? Is it because I felt insecure because I didn't have the information they were asking me? Is it because I have my own hurt around the situation? Is it because this person shouted at me the last time we met and therefore I was being defensive? Because you see, when you are able to reflect on your own emotions and you're able to dig into those emotions to figure out why you are having those emotions, you are now in a position where you are learning how to self-lead, how you're learning the art of understanding what is happening in your thoughts, what is happening in your emotions, so that you are able to better influence how you behave. So, what do we really want to do as leaders in a situation where we know that there's perhaps fear that's being brought about by uncertainty, there's probably frustration, there's maybe even physical, emotional pain that's involved? The first thing that we want to be doing is we want to be able to bring calmness to the situation. As a leader, we have to bring calm to the situations that we're in. Maybe people are angry, maybe people are shouting. As a leader, am I going to fuel the chaos, or am I going to create a situation that brings people back to calmness so that we can start to find a road that leads us to a solution? So bringing calmness is absolutely a critical. This is dousing the fire so that we can begin to think again. Remember what I said earlier on, whenever our brains are in uncertain situations, whenever there's anger, frustration, fear, it actually affects our ability to think straight. So when you're in a situation of chaos, the last thing you want is to have a group of people who can't think straight trying to actually sort it out. You actually want to bring calmness so that the brain can settle again and people can begin to think properly. I always laugh and I give the example. I'm sure you all saw several years back where we had our members of parliament throwing chairs and doing everything and shouting at each other in parliament. All that was essentially people who got into a situation that got so chaotic. People were angry, fearful, frustrated, emotionally, physically in pain. Their brain capacity literally decreased such that they could not think straight. And so you had a bunch of people who could not think straight, demonstrating what happens when a group of people are not brought back to a calm position so that their brains can begin to think again. So we bring calmness. The second thing that we want to do as leaders, we want to give hope. Because often when things get chaotic, uncertain, etc., what people are really looking for is they're looking for hope. And as leaders, we need to be able to give the hope. Once we give hope, we want to be able to establish vision again. And what vision is, it's really saying to people, there's actually hope, but there's also a roadmap to find a solution. What's that vision that we really want to go for? Yes, we can see that things aren't working the way that we would like them to work, but let's come up with a vision as to how we can come out of this and go to a new place. And so once we cast and reveal vision, we also then want to show the pathway as to how we can get there. So for me, as leaders in uncertain times, we bring calmness, we bring hope, we reveal vision, and we show a pathway as to how people can get there. You see, that's where influence comes in now. This is what leadership is really doing. So we talked about the fact that self-leadership is the most critical thing. And I've already started to allude to it a little bit. So as a leader, what are some of the steps that you want to be taking to actually master yourself? The first is self-evaluation. And that's why I was mentioning something as simple as having a notebook that says, you know what, I'm actually going to write down every time I feel angry, every time I feel frustrated, every time I feel pain. I'm actually going to write it down, but I'm going to ask myself the question, why am I frustrated? What's really frustrating me here? Because we need to see it. If you don't see what is happening inside of you, you will never be able to change it. So you need to see it. The second thing is you need to take control. And what we mean by taking control, you need to own it. If I am always getting angry whenever Selwyn says something to me, I need to own my anger, and I need to actually say to myself, well, hang on, why do I always get angry when Selwyn says this to me? What's really the root behind my anger? And once I see it and I own my own anger, because you see, no one can own your anger for you. Irrespective of whether Selwyn is making me angry, Selwyn is doing something that causes anger within me, I have to own the anger. And once I own the anger and I understand why that anger keeps coming back, I then need to do something about it. Doing something about it might even be me saying, Selwyn, let's go and have a coffee and let's talk about a few things. The way you address me and the way you talk to me, I find it very condescending and I've got a little bit of an issue with that. Let's talk about it. But if I never speak to Selwyn, then Selwyn might never know that the way he is behaving is having a negative impact on me. And so I'm not owning and taking responsibility for clearing that up. As leaders, we have to do that. So I own it. And then thirdly, I want to change direction or redirect to change the situation. If it's something that I have to change, then I need to change it. If it's something that I need to bring somebody else into a discussion so that we change it, then we need to do that. But it all comes back to the fact that I am mastering myself and what's happening inside of me. I'm mastering my own thoughts. I'm mastering my own emotions so that I can master my behavior and channel it in an appropriate way and not add to the chaos and not add to the uncertainty, but influence people out of it into the positive direction, into the solution that we are seeking. Because what is the purpose of leadership? And again, those who were on the call at the end of last year, we talked about leadership. As leaders, we want to be able to cast vision, because the reason why people follow a leader is because they have bought into the vision that that leader is carrying. They have bought into the direction that that leader is showing them. And again, another important point to also mention is that leadership, when we talk about influence, influence is when people make the choice to follow you. Leadership and influence is not about forcing people to follow you. So again, as leaders, we need to be assessing, am I a leader because people have made the choice to follow me because they believe in the pathway that I'm taking them on? Or am I a pseudo leader because I have a title and I impose myself on them and so they are forced to follow me? That's not real leadership. Leadership is about people who say, I follow this leader because I believe in the vision, I believe in the direction that they are taking us, I believe that I want to be part of the path and the journey that they are taking us on. That's real leadership, and that's why vision is important. Secondly, service. As a leader, we serve the people that are following us. We help them understand the vision. We want to be telling them about the vision. We want to be bringing them, making them involved in the vision. We want to be able to teach them, train them, equip them, empower them, give them all the tools that they need to be able to do their part in the journey that we are on, to do their part in achieving the vision that we have cast before them. And we want to be able to give them autonomy, to be able to do what they have, what they are skilled to contribute. We want to let them go to do their job. We don't want to be leaders who are constantly micromanaging everyone. And then obviously as a leader, we also want to evaluate them to make sure that the people who are with me on the journey are contributing as they are supposed to be contributing. But it's all about people following a leader because they choose to follow the leader, and not about me forcing what the leader, what I want them to do. So I think I hope this gives you a little bit of a sense of resilient leaders. Remember, we said resilience is about being able to bounce back. Resilience is about being able to recover from chaos, to be able to recover from a situation that is difficult. And what we've talked about here is to say the way you recover, your ability to recover from chaos or a difficult situation is foremost centered on your ability to self-lead and your ability to master yourself, because in mastering yourself, you are able to think, you're able to control your emotions, and you're able to behave in ways that move people out of chaos into a pathway of hope, a vision, and for them to be able to follow again out of the chaos and out of the uncertainty. So I hope this helps a little bit. I mean, there's so many more tools that we can talk about, but in a short time like this, I hope this gives you a little bit of a sense of being a resilient leader. Selwyn, again, let me come back to you and just say, could we maybe just have a quick break again, maybe just 4 or so minutes since we're running out of time, and just have people just quickly share in their groups, and then maybe we can have 1 or 2 people just share what has impacted them the most and what they intend to do about what they've heard this afternoon.
Perfect. We're ready. We're opening all rooms right now. Welcome back, folks. Thank you for joining the conversation. I'm just waiting for everyone to get back. It would be really great to hear what impacted people and what takeaways do you have for yourselves as you go into the rest of this week, into the new week, as we start a new school week with new possibilities. So anyone who would like to speak, what impacted you? What's the takeaway for you as you leave this conversation today? Anyone would like to unmute themselves or put up their hands? If you go to the reactions section, you can put up your hands and you can tell us what your thoughts are after today's conversation. You could even place it in the chat. If you're not confident enough to speak, or you think you're going to talk, you've just got something short to say, please place it into the chat. What is it that impacted you today in today's conversation? Anyone? A moment.
Okay, so I'll go quickly.
Thanks, Corin.
Okay, so I think my colleague and I had a very good conversation, but I think what came out of today for me is the importance of self-awareness, and that is really the essence of being a resilient leader. So the more self-aware you are of your behavior, and obviously your behavior has been triggered by some emotion and some thought. If you were to think of it, going backwards in that reaction chain, that self-awareness, and the minute you can become self-aware, then you can go back into your thinking brain and you can start to bring some order back into the situation and bounce back from the chaos. So yeah, that's certainly what I learned. So thank you very much, Patrick. It was really, really insightful. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you, Karen.
Self-awareness. Understand the triggers. Anyone else? I know it's late in the afternoon, but we would love to hear your thoughts. It's 4:27. It's not a problem. We're going to continue, all right? Patrick, thank you so much for leading our conversation today. They're coming now in the chat. We appreciate your time, Patrick, and your insights and your preparation for today's talk. We know that this topic of resilience is something that years from now we will still be talking about it, because our brains are not wired for uncertainty. It wants stability. But we have the tools on managing or controlling or even working through uncertainty. So thank you for that and the insights that we gained this afternoon.